Here with reaction, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
There's got to be kids in Florida that want to go see the White House, and they can't because the president wants to make a point to the country, no?
Yeah, I think you've outlined it exactly right. I mean, this sequester, they're going to look for the most painful cuts from a publicity perspective in order to drive home the point that this was a bad idea. And the reality of it is, look, yeah, there's going to be some spending reductions here or there. But I think people watching this program who have had reductions of 10, 15, 20% in their household budget, some people have lost everything. I think they'd be shocked to hear a bunch of politicians belly aching over a 2 to 3% across the board reduction in spending, when in the real world, people have seen massive reductions in their own home budgets and in their businesses and so forth. So, look, I think you're going to continue. This is just the beginning. You're going to continue every single day. You're going to see the best-known national parks closed down, airports being targeted. They're going to try to make this as painful as possible because they're trying to make a political point.
All right, so we have nearly 9 fewer people in the labor force. We have the highest number of people on food stamps in American history now, close to 50 million people. And we've got a president now that he's bringing Beyonce and Adele to a party. He's planning his Martha's Vineyard vacation. He's playing golf with Tiger Woods. That golf trip with Tiger Woods, that would have prevented 340 people from being furloughed. Is it fair to bring this up about the way is the president too lavish in his travel?
Well, I think the president's the singular most visible figure in America, and I think you always have to lead by example. I think you said it in your introduction. Everyone understands the president's entitled to vacations. We certainly believe he's entitled to security, all the security they need, and so forth, given the history in this country in the past, all of those things. But I think you have to lead by example. Some of the congressional offices here have led by example. For example, in my office, when I took office, we reduced 10% our budget, our office budget, at least 10% a year, because we wanted to set that example. And so when the sequester hit the Congress this year, it wasn't nearly as big an impact as it otherwise would have been. But even there, we had to cancel travel, staff travel for a few weeks, just to make sure we came under those figures. Now, listen, none of this is foreign to people back home who have had to do this in their own personal lives. And I think it's critical that the president and others in public office, to the extent they can, should lead by example in that regard.
All right, so tomorrow we're going to get Paul Ryan's budget. It's, as I understand, a budget that will get in balance in 10 years. It will defund Obamacare. It will not increase taxes. You're fighting to defund Obamacare in the Senate.
Right.
You're in the minority, obviously, in the Senate. How does that happen?
Well, first of all, Obamacare is a disaster. This is not politics anymore. We're talking about the impact that it's having on real people's lives. You are soon going to start to see people who are going to get laid off because their boss wants to get under the 50-employee threshold to avoid all the costs that come with this. We're already seeing businesses that are moving their workforce to part-time. That's hurting people as well, not to mention some of the other hidden costs that are in Obamacare that aren't going to be hidden much longer. So just implementing Obamacare is going to be a disaster. And I think we've kind of lost the sight of that here since the Supreme Court ruling last year. I'm glad that Ted Cruz, the new senator from Texas, he has filed an amendment to the continuing resolution to defund Obamacare. And what I've said is, look, I don't vote for continuing resolutions, but if we can pass that amendment, I would be willing to vote for that continuing resolution. I know that's pie in the sky to some people, but I'm telling you, this Obamacare bill, as it begins to be implemented, is going to cost people their jobs, their raises, their hours. It's a disaster in implementation, and I'm glad to hear the House is taking a lead in their own budget in that regard.
Well, and you know what? They don't have to fund it. I mean, this is the beauty of having at least one House which is in Republican control, and a lot of pressure is going to be brought to bear on these guys, and I think this is a test of the direction that they're going to go. Here's what we know. The president sold this at $900 billion. Latest estimates have it at $2.8 trillion. So it's tripled already in what the president told us sold this as, and we know that over a long period of time it's going to add $6.2 trillion to the deficit. So why would we go forward with this?
But first of all, and that's just the governmental cost. I mean, who's accounting for the jobs that are going to be lost, people that are going to get laid off, people that are going to lose their hours? Look, we have a health insurance problem in America, but you don't need a government takeover of health insurance to solve it. How about letting any American and every American buy insurance from any company that will sell it to them in any state in the country, allowing Americans to buy the insurance they need, insurance that meets their needs, not some government mandate, allowing Americans to buy their insurance pre-tax, the way their bosses buy it for them. Now, these are some innovations that we could think of right now that would improve the quality of access to health care. We don't need a government takeover of the health care industry in order to offer health insurance to more Americans.
What do you
make
make
that's
of
important?
The president's made a big deal about reaching out to Republicans. He was on his weekly radio address this weekend and started being a little more conciliatory just days after he was saying, oh, what are we going to cut, poor children or disabled children, and claiming that the sea would turn into blood and pestilence would be taken over the land. So what do you make of that? Is it the poll numbers are down, that he oversold this, that this was a case of jumping the sequester, as the Wall Street Journal put it? Is this going to last long, especially after Ryan's budget comes out?
Well, I don't know. As you might be shocked to learn, they didn't call me before doing that to consult with what I thought. But
what a shocker.
Let me just tell you, but a couple things. First of all, I think that's good. If it's a sincere move in that direction, I think it's positive anytime our leaders can talk. I think people are getting tired of these man-made crises every week here in Washington, D.C. They have enough to worry about in their lives. The last thing they need is their politicians creating crisis. On the other hand, we have a fundamental difference in this country. We all agree that we need to grow our economy. But the Democrats believe that the way you grow the economy is through more government spending. And we believe the way you grow the economy is through the private sector, and that government's job is to make it easier for the private sector to create jobs, incentivize them to do that. That's a big difference, and that's what we should be having a debate about, because history and evidence is on our side.
All right, one last question. Senator Rand Paul had his big filibuster. You took part in it last week. Ted Cruz did. Mike Lee did. You four guys seem to be like the new guard and more conservative, advancing ideas, more willing to fight than maybe some of the old guard. What did you think when John McCain referred to Rand Paul and Ted Cruz as wacko birds?
Well, look, I know Senator McCain feels very strongly about national defense. We all admire his service to our country, and I have a good working relationship with him. I think we're always best served when we don't, especially within our own party and our own movement, call each other names. And let me just say this about the filibuster. I stood for the right of a senator like Rand Paul or anybody else. If it was a Democrat, I would have said it too, to have a serious question answered. Now, we have some diversity of opinion about drone programs. Obviously, I think he raised a very legitimate issue about how they would be used here in the U.S. He deserved an answer, and I'm glad he got one.
All right. Thank you. Senator, always good to see you.
Thank you.
And